Welcome back, everybody. This Week in America online, thisweekinamerica.us. Donald Bartling was inducted into the U.S. Army in the 1950s, served in the U.S., Japan, and Korea. His book, For Country, details his 21 months of military service from induction to discharge. It's a look into what Army life was like in that time period. Donald's experiences taught him many things, like how one can be a good soldier and a good Christian as well. He has many more insights as he looks back into his experiences that range from his values and beliefs, as well as his view on the current situation in the country. Donald G. Bartling, author of For Country, My Little Bit, 21 Months of Service, our guest on today's This Week in America. Donald, thank you so much for being with us on the program. Looking forward to having a chance to talk with you. Thank you.
I'm glad to be here. I'll answer the question that you have, the best I know how.
Well, the book is excellent, and I've got plenty of questions. And let's start, first of all, with why you decided to write this book. It's such an important part of history that we sort of maybe have a tendency to overlook as we're focused on the future and going ahead 120 miles an hour. It really brings it back into perspective what you and a whole generation went through to get us where we are in the country today. Why did you decide to write the book?
It was written at a request of a neighbor of mine for his grandkids because he felt when he read their history books that they were being taught in high school were so incomplete. In fact, he ignored an awful lot of important items to his point of view. So I wrote it for his children, and that surprised me where it's gone after that. I did not write a book just to be writing a book. I wrote it for their benefit, and I hope a lot of other people's benefit now, too.
Well, it will benefit a lot of people in filling in that gap and again, reminding us where we came from as a country. Interesting title, For Country, My Little Bit, 21 Months of Service. Donald G. Bartling is the author and our guest on the program. You talk at the end of the book where you came up with that title, the little bit aspect of that. I love that. Explain that.
Well, it's mainly because 21 months in a military career is fairly short compared to people that serve 30 and 35 years, some of them. And we have the cooperation of many people in various places, each one doing their little bit that makes the overall operation a success or a failure. In my case, it was a success. And I appreciate all the guys that worked for me, and I started at the bottom of the ladder when I joined the unit, ended up commanding it for 10 weeks at the end, and we saw action, and I could always depend upon them, no matter what race they were, what their ethnic background might be. If you treat an individual right, he'll treat you right. And as a commander, you have to be concerned about their welfare as well. And mission comes first, but doing it at the least possible cost comes second.
We're talking about the period of the Korean War, and as you mentioned, this was the first action with a racially integrated force, which gives us another historical perspective as you're reading the book. The invasion of South Korea by North Korea occurred the end of June in 1950. And you, a young man at the time, knew something like you really needed to prepare because you thought you were probably going to be called into action to defend the country.
Yes, I did. I registered for World War II in May of 45, and they gave me a 2-month deferment after the war was over in order to have food for all the destitute people worldwide at the time. And they never did call me, so I knew I was at the top of the list.
And in the book, you show documents, which is interesting, and it follows your career as you're the 21 months, as you're in Korea, getting there in Korea, and the return. You show a number of documents. It's interesting that you had saved all these documents, but that really adds to the story because it takes us back in time to the documentation of what happened during that era. It really adds to the book, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. I have to credit my mother, now deceased, of course, but she helped me accumulate that, and I didn't know I was going to use it that way. I sent those things home when I got those orders and things like that, and she just saved them for me. And the pictures you find in that book, which I took, I would take a pictures and send them home. She'd get them developed, send them to me. I would then label them, send them back home, and I bought me an album in Japan on the way home, and they're in that album in the order that they were taken. They coincide with the events, and that I have to give her credit for doing that for me. They laid in my file cabinet 50 years before I took them out and wrote the book, but it fell in place real easily.
It really adds to the book. It brings everything to life. We're talking about the book For Country, My Little Bet, 21 months of service. Donald G. Bartling, Bartling, is the author and our guest in the program. This is a republished book. It is now available for sale at the lowest retail price. Available for sale at all Amazon sites, at Barnes & Noble, Page Turner's Bookstore, Chapters Indigo in Canada, Waterstones in the UK, Booktopia in Australia and New Zealand, and a lot more. Also available for sale as an ebook, paperback, and hardcover. All of this information is available at Donald's website, which is forcountrycitizenship.com. You can find it at pageturner.us as well. And you can link on directly to our website, thisweekinamerica.us, and go and get this information. It's interesting what you went through as a young man during that period. Once you report, you talk about the most difficult transition was the loss of personal freedom. Talk just a bit about that, because you go from this young man, you've got the whole life ahead of you. Now you're really leading this structured life. Talk about making that transition to realizing you're going to follow orders from somebody else.
Well, that you kind of put it all together in a nutshell there. If you're committed to your citizenship, to your oath of taking office with the military, then you will try to do the best you can all the time. And we do have to have trade-offs. And the trade-off in the military is you take orders, you don't give many. And if you're in a position to give them, then you've got another responsibility toward those subordinates that you don't misuse them or abuse them. So it's a different type of lifestyle, and yet I say it changed my life in ways I don't even know, because I don't know what I would have been.
Exactly. It's interesting, in the book you talk about, you leave Washington State, you go to Fort Omaha, and one of the things that jumps out in the book, For Country, as you're reading that, is right away you start making relationships, and these are friendships that, I mean, these were like brothers to you, weren't they? Long-lasting after...
Actually, if you're a combat veteran and you have very much of that together, you develop a relationship that's almost stronger than brothers. And it lasts a lifetime. Most of mine are now deceased because, well, I'm 91 in a couple of months, and those are pretty well gone. But there are some of them that I saw an entire lifetime. They stop and visit me, and I go visit them, and things like that. So it develops a very strong relationship. But you want that sort of thing when you're got your neck sticking out, that you know that you will help them, and they will help you the best they know how, and as long as they can physically do that.
You know, you talk about in the book For Country the time when the induction and when you're actually sworn in, and they hand you a rifle, and it becomes real at that point because that rifle is basically a part of you. It's going to be a permanent part of you during this process. You talk about feeling a great deal of patriotism. Talk about that, and I imagine you still probably, when you think back, can recall how you felt representing and defending our country at that time when you were sworn in and handed that rifle and the responsibilities to continue to keep us as a free nation.
Well, I've always been proud of the American citizenship. Not that we're perfect by any means. We got a lot of faults, but we're human, and being also a Christian, I realize that there's such a thing as forgiveness, too. And working together with my comrades to accomplish benefits for my nation was never felt to me to be a burden to me. Dangerous, maybe yes, but a burden, no.
The book we're talking about is For Country, My Little Bit, 21 Months of Service. Donald G. Bartling, our guest on the program. Information on the book you'll find at our website, thisweekinamerica.us. You talk about the first experience at shooting at someone. Talk about that. Obviously, that is still a vivid part of your memory.
Well, it's a known fact that there are many American soldiers in particular, I can't speak for the rest, I don't know, but a lot of them cannot bring themselves to pull the trigger and fire even in the heat of battle. They won't. And that first shot, when you got a man in your sights rather than an animal or a tree post or something like that,
yes,
it is a sobering thing, and yet you know that's what you're there for, and it's for your country that you're doing it. In this particular case, it turned out that he had been a mole from the North Koreans that were trying to find out what we were doing and when we did it. And when we got the order to bring him down, we did. I don't know whether it was my bullet or somebody else's, but the six that fired, one of them did. He came down.
In the book, you talk a lot about the actions, the battles that you were involved in, the fall of 1951, action winter of 51 and 52, and spring of 52. That's all laid out in the book, again, with documents, with pictures. For Country, My Little Bit, 21 Months of Service. Donald G. Bartling is the author. Let's talk about when it was time to leave and to come home. And you'd almost think you'd be basically jumping up and down that I can leave this. I'm going to be able to go back home. And you said you had mixed emotions. Talk about that, because you were leaving a lot of friends behind and still the mission to be accomplished.
Well, that's particularly true. And I had just been in the 2 months before as a commander of my platoon. We had been preparing for Pork Chop Hill. And one of my men got killed on Pork Chop Hill while I was on the ocean coming home. But we also came to the conclusion that we had a stalemate there. When we went in a year earlier, we felt we were going to win it and go home. Well, we were finding that we weren't going to win it, we were just going to a stalemate. So when you had an opportunity to go home, you did. I turned down a possible promotion to, well, in fact, it would have been a sure thing, a field commission, just because there seemed to be no future in it there anymore. But we were concerned about our friends that were there after we left. We really were. I know I was.
And you received a Bronze Star for your service to the country. When you come back, in the official discharge, the certificate, this was in August of 1956. You talk about giving you a whole different outlook as to how you conducted yourself as a citizen. Once in the military, once representing the country quite proudly, it's not something you leave behind, is it?
No, you don't. And of course, you're running at a high tempo, and I don't slow down physically either so quickly. I'll give you an instance there. After my brother came back from Alaska in '54, I'd been out of active duty a year and a half already, and we had two double beds in the same room. And he'd been out, and the night he came in, he touched my feet, and I floored him right there. He really started yelling, "Hey, it's me," and it was. But that physical reaction stays with you for a while.
The book is called For Country, My Little Bit, 21 Months of Service, Donald G. Bartling. His website is forcountrycitizenship.com. Also information at pageturner.us. The book is available, again, at all Amazon sites, Barnes & Noble, Page Turner's bookstore, Chapters Indigo in Canada, Waterstones in the UK, Booktopia in Australia and New Zealand. A lot more, and it's available as an ebook, paperback, and hardcover. It's interesting as well. With the 50th anniversary, you received recognition from Korea in their appreciation, a medal from South Korea. Talk about, as you look back on the time you spent there and with the Koreas back in the news now, what are your thoughts on all of that?
I feel that our nation did right. The UN was right in going in there and helping protect the South Koreans. But I'm much more concerned at the phlegmatic attitude that most American citizens have, do not realize how dangerous the world is right outside their front door or in their own homes.
Yes.
Because of the advancements in technology and nuclear energy and missiles to deliver them. I would like to see them be more committed to keeping our military strong, so when we need it, we got it right now, not next year or the year after. We don't have that opportunity anymore to build our defense after we decide we're going to fight. Now, I can understand why it happened in the past, but that's where I feel that, and a lot of people tell me this, that's where the teaching of history in our school system is not adequate.
Well, there does seem to be a gap there, and it's interesting. You think about it as you're reading the book For Country, and you point out it's necessary for the defenses of our nation to be ready at all times. And you lived through a couple of periods where things happened rapidly and caught us off guard, and we really need to be diligent, don't we?
That's right. That was my message. Chapter 9 was really the conclusion of the book for my neighbor's grandkids, because I go back and go through the 20th century and where we've made the same mistake several times, but the ability to wait and react is no longer that length of time. We have to be ready now.
The book is called For Country, My Little Bit, 21 Months of Service. Donald G. Bartling, our guest in the program. Several minutes left in the show. You talk about convinced that the religious convictions of the men made them better soldiers and more effective in carrying out their duties. Talk about that, because I mentioned in the beginning you found out that you were able to balance being a good soldier and a good Christian as well. Talk about that aspect of it.
Well, there's several areas. Morality. The main thing, these religious people that I had in my unit that I was a part of were more dependable on carrying out orders, and they were not as easy to panic when we have a dangerous situation. And I think that kind of tells along until you get to the chaplaincy, and I knew a number of chaplains and met them, and they served our servicemen very, very well for problems they have at home, problems they have right there, and particularly if they're wounded. I can't say anything but good for the chaplaincy, and we've had it threatened here in the last few years. And I try to support everything that can build the chaplaincy.
It's interesting you mentioned this started off as basically a history lesson for a friend's child. Let's talk about, in a few seconds here, dealing with Page Turner and actually working on this book and getting it published. What has this experience been like working with Page Turner?
All of them are very good, and exhibitors have been too. I often felt that I shouldn't start a new project after you're 80 years old, but I did. And I have to learn along with it, but you've been very good at guiding it through it and asking the question you need to. You use the emails very thoroughly, and they all do the same thing. You built my respect for the press a little bit, particularly that part of the press.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And the people at Page Turner do an excellent job, Page Turner Press and Media, in taking authors and getting the book ready for publication and getting the word out there, because this really is an important part of history. It's who we are as a country. Again, with the pictures, with the actual documents that you use, it makes it come alive. It's almost like we're watching a movie as we're following Don's story.
They asked me to make a movie, and I declined for the simple reason, what I wrote is one thing. What might come out of the movie, but after they've been written into dialogue, may not be the same thing. I don't want to take a chance.
Well,
I want it to be accurate.
that's interesting because these are your words, your thoughts, your observations, not somebody else's that's trying to hype up something so they can get a few more people into the movie theater. So I appreciate that aspect.
Absolutely right.
The total honest story from Donald in the book For Country, My Little Bit, 21 Months of Service. Donald G. Bartling is the author, Bartling. Once again, it's available at its lowest retail price, for sale in all Amazon sites, Barnes & Noble, Page Turner's Bookstore, Chapters Indigo in Canada, Waterstones in the UK, Booktopia in Australia and New Zealand, and a lot more, available as an ebook, paperback, and hardcover. Donald, it's been a pleasure. I really enjoyed having the chance to read a bit of history in the book For Country, and great having you with us on the program today.
Well, thank you for the opportunity.
It is our pleasure.
Appreciate talking to you, too.
Thank you. This has been a pleasure, and the book is available all across the country. It's called For Country, My Little Bit, 21 Months of Service. Donald G. Bartling, the guest and author. You're listening to This Week in America. We're back after these messages.